So welcome back to Black Bulb. This time it's Black Bulb strategy session.
Welcome to for the first time.
First one ever.
Yeah.
Let's
the
just
pilot episode.
We'll give a little bit of an introduction to the idea. Well, the aim of this series is to talk with artists, which is actually every podcast, where we have an artist who's doing pretty well, and then we also have Joe, who's our main strategy guy at Black Bulb, and they collab on strategies within the industry, outside the industry, and how hopefully we can give some practical advice for all artists and creatives out there.
Just getting started.
Just getting started.
Just getting started.
Yeah.
So before Alex was in here, you and I touched on the idea. And by the way, please introduce yourself, my friend.
Oh, yeah, I go by SK. I'm a illustrator, multimedia. I don't know.
All around badass.
Yeah. I do a lot of black ink and dead things.
I really enjoy the intricacy of your work. It is very detailed. I
Thanks,
dig it a
man.
lot. So we were speaking before Alex came back in about how you got started, and you kind of said you've been drawing forever, but you've been taking it seriously for the last few years, or kind of go through that real quick.
That's yeah, I definitely think it's a choice. I was actually on track. You kind of talked about like life paths.
Yeah.
And there's a point where it feels like you're too late.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I almost hit that point. I
Really?
thought I was going to be a lawyer. I was going to school for pre-law and kind of just realized it would make me totally miserable. And so I had this thing in the background that you're always like, that's just a hobby, you know, I doodle.
Yeah.
And I switched my focus in school and started realizing like, if I put some energy into this, I could get more out of it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, like the decision to start taking it seriously, like there's a very specific moment in like 2015 maybe, where I made that call because I'd been doing it forever and taking it for granted.
So that's kind of what I wanted to talk about a little bit, because we were saying before, when you're a kid, you start doing art, it's really satisfying really quickly.
Yeah.
You get a lot of joy out of like that cool monster that you drew or whatever it was, and you show your friends that are, it's like kind of like it's a safer space to share stuff, right?
Everything goes on the fridge.
If it makes the fridge, then you're golden. Exactly. So what? Even being a lifelong artist, did you have some of those internal barriers? Like you just said, it's a hobby. You don't necessarily take it. What was that like, overcoming that in the decision to kind of take it more seriously?
That's a good question. I think that, every creative person in any discipline can relate to that idea of like, I'm not good enough, that imposter syndrome.
Just gonna say, yeah.
Yeah. And then it also, if you couple that with sort of a being a perfectionist, which I totally am, there's this desire, you want to see like dramatic leaps forward in progress and in what you're pulling off, for it to feel like you're doing something that makes sense. And that's totally the wrong expectation, in my opinion. I think that the way to slow down and like give yourself permission to make mistakes is to savor the tinier improvements. Like just saying, I can pull a slightly better line than I did on my last drawing or whatever, and not get so hung up on the, incredibly dramatic leaps forward, because that kind of thing, like, it's also, I'm sure we'll get to this, but social media plays a huge point of view, because you're seeing everybody's like, here's my art after I've practiced for years.
Right.
And it's so easy to go, well, why am I not producing something at that level? And you're like, I still do that. I know artists with hundreds of thousands of followers who still do that. They go like, why doesn't it look that good?
Yeah. And
you have to savor the increments, because it's never going to happen so fast,
So I've always wondered about this, and I think it you see like actors become successful, or sometimes you'll see like athletes even become successful, and they'll jump into some kind of a visual thing, like Sylvester Stallone paints. Like, everyone knows that.
Yeah.
Like, and it's like, and they're not bad, but he's very confident. Apparently, if you go to that dude's house, the first thing he's going to show you is his paintings, right?
Because he's Sylvester Stallone.
And he's Sylvester Stallone, and he's confident in his known success. But I think that live art, so, music, stand-up comedy, or athletics, you do notice the big moments, because there's no way to reference back your previous work, really, unless you're actually sitting down. Stallone may watch the choreography from Rocky 1.
This painting is better than Rocky.
Exactly. He may do that. That may be his move.
Right.
However, I do think that there's a little, it's different with, this is just going to do this the whole time. Do you think that part of the reason that visual artists tend to progress slower and maybe get a little bit more frustrated is like there is so much evidence of the improvement? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
you can, like you were saying, like I can look 4 years down the line, right?
You're really creating a record as you're just progressing naturally.
Yeah.
It's a little bit more indelible maybe than other art forms, but yeah, like that's interesting, because you never hear about a musician like listening back and saying like, this doesn't sound how I wanted it to sound so much. Like I feel like that's
Yeah, or like you'll hear it from comedians a lot. That's the place where I can come to, like my first place where I accepted that art was something important to me. And it's weird to call comedy art, but
That's
I think
art,
it kind of
yeah.
fits. Every one of them hates their old stand-ups.
Sure.
They all. But again, that's such a rare thing you'll hear from some. They just don't listen to them. That's their excuse, right?
Right.
Whereas a visual artist kind of has to be like, oh, this is the stuff that I did before. I mean, it's the catalog of your work.
Well, it's I think it needs an attitude adjustment.
Yeah.
Because like you have this record that's self-referential and you're adding to the whole time, but the way you get better is to look at something and nitpick it. Like that's meaningful progress, is to say, okay, this drawing's all right, maybe it's the best I can do right now, but what can I do better next time? I don't like this anatomy, I don't like this technique, I don't like how this turned out, and you try something different next time. I'm still, dude, I've been drawing knights and medieval shit for like 5 years, and I'm still like, how do I draw metal? I'm still like working on dialing that in.
Yeah.
And it's not ever like, you're never gonna arrive somewhere and just be like, I'm done, I did it. It's it's that process of like, how can I make this a little bit better every time? And that's when you look, years pass and you look back and you're like, oh, I'm doing a lot better than that.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think that like looking back and going, I don't like the old stuff, is a good thing, and we shouldn't be so shy about that, because I don't think you're making great progress as an artist if you look back 6 years ago and you're like, I nailed it.
Yeah.
Like there's an element you have to be a little. It doesn't necessarily need to be like negative, but you have to be able a little self-criticism.
You should be able to recognize that you have grown and your techniques have gotten better. I think one thing that artists get hung up on, and I think I was guilty of this when I was. And by no means am I a successful artist, but one thing that I think like bummed me out going from like high school and on was how much the art teachers and fellow artists would keep saying it's really hard and it's not likely that you'll know anyone that'll be a successful artist. I kept hearing shit like that. And I'm like, that's super discouraging. But I mean, they're not like wrong, but I don't think you should just be preaching that all the time. It's like, yeah, everything's hard. Being a professional in anything takes time.
Sure.
But you shouldn't be like discouraging people like that.
I think that there's a difference between being discouraging and being realistic.
Yeah.
And it is true that like, okay, if you just want a stable income, go do computer science. Yeah. Like, what are you doing trying to be an artist and like make money? Because that's such a like, so few people do that. But there are ways to make it like more honest to yourself, and you're nonetheless like able to at least eke out a living.
Yeah.
I think there's something to be said for like, don't get into it if you want to make scads of money. That's not the move. But if it's something that you're passionate about and you have the drive to like put in the work that it would require to make it sustainable, then do that by all means. Yeah,
well, I think a more realistic thing to say to someone is like, right out the gate, you're gonna probably have a full-time job, and that will serve your needs for a while, and then in time, obviously social media wasn't that big back then, but in time you need to like put your stuff out there, see how it correlates with the world around you, if people like it, if you build a following, and then from there, that's when you can realistically take the leap. Yeah. Once you figure it out from there. I mean, does that seem on par?
Well, that's actually, thank you, the perfect transition. Goddamn, we're seamless. We're seamless. Our fourth podcast together, killing it. So I was listening to a podcast with Kyle Kinane the other day, and he was talking about how somehow it became an expectation for comedians to become superstars. And he's like, why is that the thing? He's like, I'm a headlining comic. I can sell 500 tickets in 40 cities. It's more than enough to have a really good, honest living. Like, that's what I want to do. He goes, what? I'm happy. I'm really stoked about that. Like, and I mean, that's crazy. I mean, if you can make, a living wage doing the art that you like, I mean, that's not a bad thing at all. You don't have to be a millionaire. Yeah. And I think that that's the problem, is we're so quickly, all we know are the examples of the hyper successful people. And part of what my interest in what you do with the Black Bull podcast is talking to these people that are like, no, dude, I have a real following, and I do it because I enjoy it. And obviously I try and stay in that realm. What do you think is the most important thing for people to do as they start to try and build their following? And because when you do it too on purpose, it feels disingenuous. Yeah. But at the same time, you do have to like work at it. Yeah.
I think that, oh man, if I had to sum it up, like the only way to have the effect that you want is to not give a shit about whether or not you get to that effect. Yeah. I think because it's so transparent. It's like you said, it's really disingenuous when you see artists who totally, whether it's Instagram or YouTube or, you know, Twitch or wherever they are, they hopped into it to like a massive following.
Yeah.
Because they just turn themselves into a product.
Mm-hmm.
And that's such a gross thing. Like, I don't know, like if you're just making nothing but like portraits of celebrities' faces and like tagging them and being like, oh, check out my shit. Like, it's awesome. I'm great.
Yeah.
Like, I think that, like you said, it's disingenuous. I don't think it has a real popular appeal. And it's confusing like popularity in the internet with actual real life success because they're not the same thing.
No, they're not. They're not at all.
I think that if you are creating what you like, and if you're doing it consistently enough, and if there are like some little tricks and games that you have to play, but you can get by just being consistent and like doing your own niche thing, people will come.
Well, and that's exactly what I wanted to touch on because you that's such a great example. I'm a good visual artist, but I'm going to tag celebrities in photos that I made of them because then I'll get some of their shine when they repost it or whatever right. Versus, so people, I think, use the whole I don't want to be a sellout or I don't want to be disingenuous as an excuse to not work hard. And I see that a lot. You know what I mean? Like, I'm an artist or I'm this, and it crosses mediums. And I'm always an advocate of wanting to do more. Like, if you want something to happen, do something.
Sure.
Work smart, not hard, or work hard and smart. You know, don't waste your time. But you do have to be consistent. Can you speak a little bit to that? I mean, did you actually like make yourself a schedule? Like, I expect myself to produce this amount of art per week, or if I'm not going to produce that, I'm going to do something that helps me stay inspired. I mean, Stephen Pressfield is really big on showing up every day. That's his thing. Is I'm at my typewriter from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. The muse knows where to find me. And if I'm not, and she goes to the office with an idea for me, and I'm not there, I'll never get that idea. He sees himself as kind of a receptacle for inspiration.
Right.
He's a little more militant than most people want to be, but I do think he's onto something with kind of having, holding yourself accountable, even though you're doing something creative. Did you do anything like that, or can you speak to that a little bit?
I do some things like that. When I do, I had a year or so where I was like, I'm going to draw something every day, and it doesn't have to be good, and I don't have to like it, but just do it. And to me, that was less about. That's less of a marketing thing than it is a betterment of my skills thing. That was much more about practice than it was about anything else, but it had the like secondary effect of people were noticing like, wow, you draw a ton and like you're getting okay at it. So I think that I'm thinking of something that you said about making the choice to like sort of jump ship and say like, this can support me. Like if I leap, this will catch me. And I feel like I'm just on the cusp of that. So like, art is not my main income, hasn't been, but there's a point where once you've amassed enough of a following doing a specific thing, people come to you for that specific thing. Yeah. And you don't need to do as much of the like, here's someone who just died's face. Yeah. Follow me. Right. Like, I've never done that and I don't want to do that. So the way I got around that as like, cause people, not to knock too hard on people do that cause it works. Yeah.
So to show in your butthole.
Yeah. Check out my OnlyFans.
Yeah, exactly.
Speaking of showing a butthole, it made me think of, I don't know how this made me think of it. You did that collab with Tequila Espolón.
Yeah.
And what do you think it takes? I shouldn't say what I think it takes, but like, what was the experience like when you get a big, massive brand like a tequila company? Yeah, wanting you to do.
How did that remind you of butthole?
I thought about tequila.
People eat worms. We're trying to get people to eat the worm again. Everyone eats ass now.
Yeah.
Tequila. We need SK.
Tequila. Yeah. SK had a collab with the tequila brand.
That's exactly how it went.
Yeah.
No, I think that was an example of that kind of consistency paying off because they have a really specific branding that they're really, we like death, but it can't be too gloomy. Like, we're not looking for heavy metal album cover. We're looking for something like a little more cartoony and fun. Yeah. Which, like, if you look at my portfolio, is something I've done in the past and I'm capable of. So that they came to me saying, like, can we get some of that thing that you do? Not, are you someone who can do this thing that we want? And I think that's a very big and specific difference.
Well, and that's a compliment. That says a lot.
Totally. The first reaction is like, are you sure? Yeah. Me? Like,
what?
Yeah. There's imposter syndrome everywhere. Yeah. But it was like probably one of the more rewarding feelings of my career to have somebody like well-known come and say like, we want what you do.
That's great.
Rather than like me chasing a client saying like, I can change what I do to make you happy if you want. Yeah. And like that doesn't happen every day. That hasn't happened to me that often. But I do take that as a really big indication that I'm maybe on the right track.
Yeah.
If I'm ever looking at like making a real career out of just drawing full time, like that's the kind of thing that you want to snowball and get more of that.
Well, I feel like we kind of touched on this when you were on the podcast about brands seeking artists for work. And you were like, well, I think there needs to be more respect there because the artists are making their brand in a way.
Totally. Like, I think we were talking about the like the meme about it is like, oh, I can pay you an exposure.
Yeah.
It's like, you don't have exposure without visual artists. You don't look like anything without the visual artists that make your logo, your content, your, like whatever. You don't have a visual identity.
Right.
If it's not for creatives. So like they're giving you exposure. You're not giving them exposure. I think that's such a backwards relationship.
And I feel like, okay, when I had Tristan Irving on and he was talking a little bit about, like there's all these murals on buildings now.
Yeah.
And those companies are kind of handpicking artists. And that seemed like the exact same thing. It's like, and they're not really paying these artists to do the murals.
But you're writing the branding that artist has created for themselves. Totally.
Yes.
Yeah, I think so.
It feels a little slimy.
Yeah, I think it can be. I haven't done a whole lot of that myself, so I can't really speak to that experience. I've just orbited it a lot.
Yeah.
I do think that you should pay artists who put art on things.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what they do.
But, that's the hot take of the episode. Welcome back. Breaking news. Artists deserve money.
I think like, let me say, I think there's a really big difference between like a company like Urban Outfitters ripping your shit off and putting on a t-shirt and selling that for money and you don't see a dime of that or any acknowledgement whatsoever. There's a big difference between that and like getting invited to do a mural on the wall of a local business.
Yeah.
Like
it does seem a little bit more of an acknowledgement of your skill set to be invited to do something on the versus, hey, I'm stealing your shit. Good luck fucking getting paid for it.
Yeah. Like, there's both are not paying an artist for their work. But I would argue that one is a lot more ethical and a lot more helpful for both parties than the other.
I agree completely. Thought on this, and I think the transition is appropriate. I feel like a lot of artists or people that are artistically driven, creative types, really shy away from anything that even resembles business. And I think, again, it's that wanting to not seem disingenuous or wanting to not say I'm turning myself into a product or whatever. I've been in sales my whole life. That's all I've ever done. And so I know that like when there's money on the table, you have to get as much of it as you can because you're going to do a lot of shit for free.
Yeah.
So like I've just accepted that in my life, I'm going to have 90 no's and then 10 yeses. And I need to make those 10 yeses really count because that's just how sales works.
Sure.
So I think that artists could benefit a little bit from that. Like if you do find yourself in a position where someone is asking specifically for what you do, you really need to maximize that, in my opinion. And you can tell me if I'm wrong, and I'd love to know the truth. But like now, if 10 people a year come to you and they want specifically what you do, and you get $5,000 a person, now all of a sudden you've made enough money for your year. And I feel like when artists are so excited to get paid for something or acknowledged for like what they make, that maybe they could have made twice the amount of money, and the person would have still been happy with them. But you're just so used to saying, someone please buy this, that you're afraid to ask for your value.
Yeah.
And I don't know how to convince artists to do that. It's like, if you're someone's thing, like they're happy to pay for it. So don't charge them the same amount that you would charge someone that's like, whatever about it. Or like the prints you have on your website for $200. Like they want an original, tell them you'll do a mural for them for $20,000. Right. If they or offer them something huge, because that might be, your big fish. And if the person walks away happy, and now you've bought, because money is time when you're an artist, in my opinion. You just have a certain amount of time before you have to do something else that takes you away from your art before you run out of money again. Yeah. And so, how do you think we could convince artists to start doing a little more of that, or am I all wet with this idea?
No, I think you're spot on. I think that there is a divide, whether we're talking about like more lowbrow artists. Like I would put myself in that category of like, I'm not trying to. You don't walk into a gallery and like swirl a plastic cup of shitty wine and buy my shit for $15,000. That's not me.
But you could. I mean, you could. That's the other thing is like, you could have a group of metalheads, or you could have, you could somehow end up connected to the guys from Megadeth, or like, there's a niche for what you make. Right, and so when you're there, it's important that you price it accordingly. That's kind of my point.
I think I think you're right that people are really timid about like valuing themselves correctly.
Yeah.
I'm a huge like spreadsheet nerd. Like I love Excel.
Yeah.
I literally have an equation that I plug numbers into to give me like what I quote people.
Love that. That's very professional. I love that.
I think you're smart for doing that.
Yeah.
I mean, we have a same thing here. It's like how do I quickly equate up pre-production, production,
because otherwise
post-production?
you're pulling a number out of your ass, and like you said, like you want to be humble and you want to get the work.
Yeah.
So it's always going to be lower than what it actually should be.
Right.
And like I've had the experience of charging people an amount of money that they're like, okay, and I'm like, fucking seriously? Like you're fine with that?
Yeah.
But then, that's basic economics. Like you don't need to like hoard your gold, but if someone's going to pay you this number, you'd be stupid not to take that number.
Well, and not just that. So the way and again, this is all kind of a work in progress thing, but
Totally.
what I really want out of this series is for artists to feel empowered to do stuff, for people to feel empowered to make art, and then for artists to feel like they have a little bit of a pathway to making that a living. That's really what would make me happy. And so one of the things that I've always done is, let's say that you can tell this person is really interested in what you bring to the table. Don't just because it's unethical to charge, just because they're interested, it's unethical to charge them more for the same product than you would charge someone else. And no one's going to feel good about that. If they can find out that they're your big supporter and then you charge someone else half as much, they're going to feel jilted, right? And then you wouldn't feel good about that exchange either. So what I always do is, if I know someone really wants what I'm offering, I just upsell. Hey, so I will happily, acknowledge this bid for this amount, but we enjoy working together. Why don't we do something bigger? Why don't we do something more? Do you want to do an ongoing series? Do you want to, and then now they're getting more for it, and you've gained yourself more consistent work. And maybe you're not gouging them on the price, but you're just saying like, hey, if you like this, I'll give you as much of it as you want. It's like old drug dealer shit.
Yeah, dude, I like every email where I send someone like final files or whatever, or like the paid invoice or anything, I say like, please let me know if you would like to work together in the future. You got to end it on like and there's more.
Yeah.
Because I mean, as a creative, like you are your own producer.
Yeah.
You make stuff. So how are people going to know that there's stuff if you haven't made it yet? You have to be able to say like, hey, and if you want more of this, I can make more.
Right. But also like open the door for, I mean, if you like this artwork, I know how we can get it animated, stuff like that. And then they're like, oh, and then all of a sudden these little new ideas start popping up.
Get the wheels turning.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think valuing yourself appropriately is there's definitely, I think your instincts are right that there's a profound lack of information about how to go about that for artists. It's not something that you learn in like art school.
Yeah.
You don't learn like business economics for artists who are working for themselves.
So thank you for bringing that up, because this is something I wanted to bring up with you, the statement that you made about how many teachers are telling art students how hard it is.
Yeah.
You're a fucking art teacher. You don't know how to make any fucking money. Like, fucking A, dude. Like, where the fuck do those people get off?
Triggered.
You're fucking garbage at that.
And then you're going to end up teaching some shitty kids at some shitty college.
So you're not even that good of a fucking artist. If you were, you'd be fucking doing it. And then I don't listen to my economics teacher about how pretty my fucking paintings are.
Yeah.
Where do these fucking people get off on that shit? Stay in your fucking lane. Sorry, but like that shit drives me up the wall, because again, you just said it yourself. They don't teach you the economics of that in art class.
So clearly they don't know it.
Exactly. What the fuck do they know?
Yeah.
Exactly. Like, I had a gallery class that they charged me $2,500 to take at the Art Institute of Portland, and they literally showed me how to put a mark on a stick and hold the stick up against the wall, and that's how you can make sure all the paintings are held or hung at the same height. And she acted like she was teaching us the Pythagorean fucking theorem.
It's like, oh, it's a laser.
Super nice lady too.
Yeah.
But like, I wouldn't trust her to accomplish anything. And so she's a fucking art teacher, and that's not a bad thing. Just stay in your lane.
We need art teachers. We just
do.
also need to know other things.
Exactly. Well, no, and they need to teach art. Why isn't there someone that comes in and says, as part of an art education, like, hey, I'm an art broker, and here's how
what you should
people
charge
like
for your work. Yeah.
Here's how people are going to try and fuck you. Here's how people are going to make you money. Here's the people that are like, the same reason they don't teach you about how to balance a checkbook or how credit works in high school, but they teach you about like, whatever useless thing. I still haven't used y = mx + b, but I spend my whole day monkeying with math, right?
Yeah.
So what do you think is the best way to emotionally make artists understand that you're not a sellout for caring about money?
Oh, that's a big question.
Big old bald head, man. It's like I got a lot of thoughts in here.
Well, that's how you make a living, though, right?
Right. How bad do you want it?
Yeah.
That's the question you ask back. Because if you're like, I think I'm an example of someone who kind of rides the middle lane a little bit, where like when work comes to me, I charge accordingly. But I don't really chase work.
Yeah.
Because it's not my full-time thing.
Yeah.
But for people who it's your full-time thing, you're like, oh, I'm so like ashamed of like getting after it. And like, look, be yourself. Don't be disingenuous. Don't do, a billion portraits of Kobe.
Yeah.
Like, too soon. Don't do that, but yeah, like pursue it, because your pursuit of it is the variable upon which your success depends.
That's such a great statement. Will you time code that for me? 'Cause that's the perfect way to describe what this is all for. I mean,
it totally depends on how hungry you are. And the answer could be, I'm not that hungry. I just like drawing. You know,
Yeah.
I like posting shit on Instagram, makes me feel good. That's fine.
and then success
Yeah.
may come to you because of that.
Totally. And that's fine and great and a totally valid way to go about it. But if you're like actually trying to hustle and make a living, like, yeah, you do need to get after it a little.
Yeah.
Well, I think they should maybe like divide the two ideas, because there's the one idea, which is what we're talking about, like how to situate yourself in a right business mindset, but also like on the other side of the door is your art has to express your ideas, and if you truly are passionate about that, that's what will drive you primarily.
Totally.
You know,
And like, here's the thing. I don't think any artist ever in the history of modern art has done commercial work that they're like, this was my heart and soul.
Yeah.
I'm so proud of this. This is awesome. But
Right.
like,
yeah.
I mean, I look at those kind of jobs as like, this is what's allowing me to do the shit that I actually like.
Yeah.
And that makes it easier to say like, okay, I'll charge you what this is worth,
Mm-hmm.
because it's directly affecting your ability to pursue the things that you like that aren't like corporate drudgery, you know?
Yeah.
Because yeah, like no art. I mean, maybe not none, but most artists aren't corporatists.
No.
Most artists aren't trying to be the CEO of their art.
No, they're not. They're
And
trying
that-
to make art.
Right, and that's why they're fucking artists.
Yeah.
But there is like you do have to bend a little bit for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, the buildings that last are the ones that bend. I mean, that's actually that's not so like
Interesting
philosoph-
analogy.
Yeah.
It's not philosophical. That's the truth.
Yeah, but,
Like, there's a-
but it translates really nicely.
Let's
Thank
talk
you
about
very much.
skyscraper construction.
Well, but it's
Yeah.
exactly my point. Like, you look at an old, rigid brick building. It is beautiful. It is uncompromising, and it is a fucking testament to the sheer will of the people that put these bricks together 100 years ago. The moment the earth shifts a little bit, that fucking thing's coming to the ground. You know why? Because they didn't ask a modern engineer how to make it. You know, and you can still, there are modern buildings being made right now that are incredibly beautiful, but there was a certain degree of compromise in that, because guess what? No architect on their own has $20 billion to put up the fucking Burj Dubai.
Yeah,
It just doesn't work. So
it's got to be collaborative.
exactly.
I mean, dude, I think there's even like, I mean, I can even say just for myself, like, yeah, I'm like a one-man brand and all that, being an independent artist, but like I have a CPA because I don't want to fucking file my own taxes. That shit's a
Yeah.
nightmare.
Yeah,
I have a order fulfillment guy because I don't want to go to the post office every day.
exactly.
Like you're a team too.
Beautiful.
You're a team, a host unto yourself, man. That's the
Love it. On that note, let's talk about like actual logistics a little bit.
sweet.
So when when did you first start selling your artwork with some degree of regularity?
It would have had to have been. Maybe it's been like 5 years ago now, 4
Okay.
or 5 years.
Now, do you do anything for like data management? Do you make sure you hold on to everyone's email and all that other stuff?
Not really.
Okay.
Honestly, yeah, I think that's always something. You know, I've been hesitant. I mean, here we're talking about like, oh, you have to put yourself out there, but like I've always been resistant to the idea of like a mailing list.
Yeah.
Even though I see a lot of people have success with that.
Yeah.
Like, I don't really want to pester people.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've had a lot of repeat business, which has been great.
That's awesome.
And it's partially because I think I charge right in that perfect balance of like I'm cheap, but I'm not too cheap.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Because if you're too cheap, people are like, oh, what's wrong with it? You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Right.
That's true.
Like, what are you not good? That's a big thing. But yeah, I mean, always leaving the door open for doing more stuff. The other thing that I think gives me a lot of business is that I'm versatile.
Mm-hmm.
So I've trained myself as a graphic designer. I've taken some classes for that too. So I'm able to say, like, if somebody wants to come to me and say, hey, I need this graphic, I'm going to turn it into a screen printed shirt. I'm like, cool. Do you want me to do the file prep for that?
Yeah.
Like, I can loop that in. You can pay me a little bit of money and I'll deliver you like a file that you can just send to your printer and it's ready to go.
That's amazing.
So diversifying skill sets is like another big thing that I think brings people back.
Beautiful. That's okay. That's super impactful. The next thing I wanted to mention, me and Alex are actually in the middle of this right now. Every year we do something nice for our like repeat clients, close friends, or whatever, and we figure out like a Christmas gift or something like that.
Yeah.
There's also a book by Gary Vee called The Thank You Economy. Do you think that there's any benefit for artists to maybe like, hey, you know, you've been a good client this year, you know, you've been a repeat person. The people that you would, off the top of your head, remember like 10 or 15 of.
Send them a Christmas card.
Yeah, the handwriting.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's so impactful anymore. I mean, I
Totally.
have one person in my life that sends me a holiday card on every holiday, and it's Michelle. She's like my mom, and she signs it from the whole fucking family, and I know they didn't do shit.
Yeah.
And every time I move, she
from
texts.
us. No, it's not. Yeah.
No, she signs their names. Like, Brian doesn't dot his I with a heart, Michelle. I fucking know that. But it makes my day. And when I move, she texts me, and she keeps a handwritten little notebook of all of her friends, and she sends like 25 cards every holiday.
Yeah.
And again, she's not doing it to up the attendance at her funeral, but it's gonna. You know what I mean? Like, that's not why you. But you see, that's a morbid way to describe it, but it's
No,
the
I see
truth.
what you mean.
And it's so impactful now. Just like it's pen to paper. I didn't just click print. I did something for you. Do you think that I think every artist that's even got a small amount of success probably has a few people they could do that for.
Probably. I do. Rather than like. I don't go as far as like sending out a thank you card, but I'm really, really big on anytime someone orders something from me or like anything touches my hands, there's wet ink on there somewhere where I write them thanks for the support and sign my name.
That's amazing.
That's good.
Like every single time. And sometimes I'll get fun with it. Like I'll sign the back of a sticker that I put in their package or something like that. And I think that I come at that because like my day job is I'm a printer.
Yeah.
And so I'm really big on like the tactile, like feel, something you can touch and hold in your hands. Like I don't want to send an email. And so I think that seeing that someone like took the time to even just write like, hey, thanks.
Yeah.
And it's not just you get your like, order slip in there and it's totally impersonal.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's really a big deal.
One of our other clients do these boxes that are for wireless internet service provider boxes, right? Sounds very dry. They have this tray in it, and it's got all the stuff that you're going to need with really good instructions on it. He includes Skittles or Starburst in every single one of them because he knows that someone just climbed up a mountain to install the box.
And they're going to be starving. Yeah.
And he's like, dude, we get so many emails saying thanks for the candy.
That's funny.
Also, they always include like an extra nut or bolt because you always drop one when you're on top of a tower.
Oh, that's so funny.
Shit.
So you don't have to go get it and go back up.
Yeah. It's like, I mean, so little stuff like that just does so much. For people,
Right.
I really dig that that's important to you.
Well, I think what you're talking about too is like is branding, and your branding can be an invitation for like repeat business in its own. Just the standard thing you do can also be leaving the door open for like, hey, email me your next idea.
Yeah. How did you pick the things that you didn't want to do, and how did you go about finding them? As an example, I need a CPA. I want a fulfillment person. Is there any other part of the job of getting your art out there that you don't care for and that you had to kind of outsource?
Well, those two. Those are the big
two.
ones.
Yeah.
Other than that, I like doing just about everything else.
Awesome. So how did you find your people that are doing those for you?
Well, I'm the people.
That's awesome.
I haven't gotten it running just yet, but like I want to move towards making as many of my own prints myself as I can.
Beautiful.
Usually my hands are at least touching them at some point.
Yeah.
But so I have a 100-year-old letterpress in my garage that I'm working.
That's awesome.
I've seen
this
it.
giant.
I've seen the one they have over at Ablation. Like that stuff is so fun and nerdy.
Insane.
Papers and pens. I don't know why it's so great, but they're just
it's
best.
awesome. Yeah, it's great. And so I want to work towards having most of my print production be like literally in house. Like it's in my garage.
Beautiful.
I want to screen print my own posters and like that's all stuff that I have the tools, but I have not yet the. Oh God, I don't know, maybe startup costs.
Yeah.
Because it's like it's all antique equipment. If you need an ink roller, it's going to be $200.
Yeah.
Racks
So
up
you
quick.
need that one guy to come in and order 1,000 prints.
Totally.
To kind of have it
yeah.
make sense.
Or
So
you're
if you're
like, okay,
listening and you
supply
want
costs.
1,000 metal prints, that's fucking.
Hey, let me letterpress your
Yeah,
shit.
that's tough.
Totally. So I think that, being a one-man army, but also like knowing where you need help is really, really important.
Yeah.
And also knowing the things that I like to do. And I like printing. I love the process of producing a print. So I'm not going to outsource that.
I like that you know what you like. When you were finding out the things that you didn't like, I feel like people have an anxiety about that because, as an example, I'm not great with CPA work either. So if I Google CPA, how do I know this guy's not going to fuck me? Like, how do you get, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
How do you, how did you personally like decide that this person was going to do your fulfillment or this person was going to be your CPA? Did you, seriously, it could be as simple as the reviews online, but I mean, there's a certain leap of faith you take when you hand something off.
So for me, they've all been like community connections.
That's wonderful.
I have not worked with somebody that I've just like Googled, certified public accountant in Portland, Oregon. Like that's never happened to me.
That's great.
It's been people I've known that I liked, and they know me. They know what I do. That's not to say that like you should only ever get into business with your friends because that's terrible advice.
Yeah.
But I have been lucky, like, and it's just because of kind of like you said, like it's because I know what I like that I've attracted people who like the same shit, and they have other skills and other specialties and other degrees and things that they know how to do. And so it's a how can I help you? How can you help me?
I love that.
I think that's much more. I would much rather do it in sort of an informal and more personal way than like, make cold calls saying like, "Hi, I'm an artist. Can you help me with my taxes?" Like, I don't want to do that.
I mean, I think if you use that voice, you'd probably be golden.
People are like, this guy sounds pathetic. Let's help him.
He needs it.
I got 2 more questions for you. Skill building, because you mentioned that earlier.
Cool.
You hear about the stories of like the people in like the Renaissance that were literally drawing a circle for a year and like all that kind of stuff. Do you? I think that we are drawn, at least I personally am, like I'll see these ads for how to play the guitar, and it's like a video game that teaches you how to play the guitar or whatever, and I feel like there's a part of my brain that thinks that that's cheating. But why would you torture yourself? If you can get the skills, get them in the funnest, easiest way possible. Do you have recommendations for people that, want to get better at drawing as far as skill building?
Yes. There's no fun, easy way.
Okay.
There's a way that is hard and shitty, and you'll find it fun if you're passionate about it.
That's awesome. Yeah. Thank you for saying it like that. Okay, perfect.
You're not gonna, I mean, I still, I think a great example is something like Photoshop. Like, I've been using Photoshop for like 10 years, and I'm still like, how do I do that? I should Google that. And there's some random person who's made a 12-minute YouTube video that like perfectly answers my question.
Yeah.
But artists, like, art is a weird thing because it's always going to come down to you. It's not, the software screwed up or the like, tis a poor blacksmith blames his tools and all that.
Yeah.
So you have to put in the work, and there's not any way around that. But the work itself will be fun if you really care about it. As far as drawing, I think life drawing is the best thing you can possibly do to get better at drawing. Okay. Drawing from imagination, like people focus on outlines, they focus on what they think things look like, and it doesn't work because things don't look how you think they look.
That's fair, yeah.
Right.
Like, we don't look the way we think. We see a mirror image of ourselves.
Yeah, like there was when I was a freshman and I was taking like an art elective, there was like one of the first days, they're like, okay, everybody draw a nose. And like no reference, like just sketch a fucking nose, right? And then they paired us up and they're like, okay, now draw that nose, like draw that person's nose. It's like, so you see the difference between like your brain makes a lot of assumptions. Like when your brain perceives visual information, it takes a ton of shortcuts. That's why there's optical illusions. Like, you look at this picture of a person and you're supposed to focus on this spot and you don't notice that like they don't have ears because your brain just kind of fills it in or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, learning how to see as someone who's then going to reproduce what they're seeing accurately is a big deal.
Okay.
I think that, and a lot of people will say like, oh, this only applies if you want to draw realistically, and I disagree. Because I think what makes abstract art interesting, or anything that's not actually depictive, what makes it interesting is that you could follow the rules if you wanted to, but you're breaking them for a reason.
Yeah. No one doubts that Dali can draw a clock.
Right, dude. Like if Picasso wanted to draw a shoe, it'd be the most fucking amazing shoe ever. Yeah. But like that's why like the Cubist shit is interesting, because you're like, okay, you don't have to do that, but you are.
Yeah.
Like you see the traditional skill in it.
Totally. And I think people leap into abstraction because there's this kind of, maybe this is my major beef with like art education. There's this kind of like, oh, there's no wrong way. Like it's whatever you want. It's like, no, learn the fundamentals. Get good at that.
Fuck yeah. Love that.
You have to learn that. Then you can do whatever you want. Yeah. Then training wheels off. There are no rules. But like
know the rules so you can break them.
Totally. Exactly. So yeah, I mean, life drawing sessions, like you don't need to go to art school to learn this shit. Like there are great, there's great online resources for it. And then like even here in Portland, there's like 3 or 4 places where you can go and pay $15 and like someone gets naked and you draw them.
Yeah.
And I think that's like super, super helpful. Nothing will teach you anatomy. Nothing will teach you light source. Like nothing will teach you how to make something look good faster than drawing something from life.
That's great.
Because you have an immediate reference to like, if it doesn't look good, why?
That's awesome.
So that's my big recommendation.
I love direct answers. So fun. Okay. Alex, I have one last question. This one's kind of out there. Do you have anything you wanted to touch on before we go to our final question of the day?
Nothing right now.
All right.
Yeah.
I want something happened with me and Alex the other day, and I'm not like a big like the secret dude or anything like that, but I do think there's something to be said about just kind of putting your intentions out there into the world. So like, what would make you happy in your career in the next year moving forward? Like what would excite you?
Can it go longer term than a year?
Whatever. Yeah, exactly.
I will tell you about my like dream.
Yeah,
like
I want to hear it.
Game.
Exactly. Yeah, let's hear it.
So I really want to do a creative agency that is like entirely artist run and art focused.
Awesome.
I want to have clients that are maybe more commercial or really just whoever, but I want to offer something where we have a roster of visual artists. We have all the necessary things to reproduce art. We have in-house graphic design, all that shit, so that someone can come to me and say, hey, I need this, whatever ad campaign. And I'll go, cool, let me hook you up with the artist who's going to do that for you, and then we'll produce it for you.
That's awesome.
So that's like the dream, and that's synthesizing like everything I love about, I am like a people guy, like I love talking to clients.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that's synthesizing like my love of printing, my love of reproducing things beautifully, and integrating it into something that like actually can make money.
Mm-hmm.
Because I can letterpress all day, and people are going to be like, okay,
Yeah.
I think that I'm really passionate about printing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that I see that as just as big a part of my process as drawing. Like the reproduction of it is its own thing.
Yeah, totally.
And I think that increasingly the only people who are going to give a shit about that are artists and other creatives. Like I think increasingly people, there's no reason to get, these super expensive like letterpressed handmade business cards when you can go to the like whatever website and get 500 for $30 and they're printed on cheap shitty paper and they look bad.
It's funny that you say that because I know that that's true because I was trying to do that for a very corporate thing once. I wanted to get like the things from Oblation.
Yeah.
And I've heard business people say, make people earn your business card. Don't just be the person that's putting them in everyone's hand. And if you have a $4 business card, like you're going to think twice about who you give it to.
Well, the per unit cost, totally.
You're like, are you worth the, maybe you'll, like, it's like a personal thing. Like maybe they'll call, who knows?
But I think that, and I think it's also kind of taking advantage of something that I really resent, which is like the commodification of creative energy and the idea that like, everyone's got an ad campaign that's like, oh, artsy fartsy, like this is so quirky and interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So steal that from them. Like that's being produced by people in a boardroom in suits talking about what will sell shit to people in their 20s. So like, why are we not just making that?
We used to do a show called the Louis Dirtbag Financial Hour.
Yeah.
And he's one of my friends. He's actually in Yale right now trying to like be like a full-blown like commodities trader. Like he likes that shit. He loves numbers and he's an actual genius. And he knows the people that have bought and sold 3 or 4 of the really kitschy like trendy restaurants around town. Like one of them sold tiny cheeseburgers.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And like Portland shit.
And it's so funny. Like they have that down to on paper to the number what people will pay for.
It's so weird.
It's crazy.
Yeah,
so it's cool that you're fighting against that in a practical way. Like this really was handmade. It's more expensive. Give it to the right fucking person.
And there's a reason. There's a reason I think to undercut that.
Yeah,
because it's a market that should belong to creatives and it doesn't right now.
No.
Right.
And I think that's part of the reason why I want to do this so much is I think that knowledge is power and having frank conversations with creative like this is over time going to make creative types a little less afraid to dip their toe in that part of it because you should own your shit.
Totally.
You hear stories about musicians and all these people that have, Michael Jackson owns the Beatles catalog. What the fuck is that?
Like all the royalties nonsense.
Exactly. So
yeah.
Everyone talks about like own your masters, own this. I think that knowledge is a way to do that on a smaller level for everyone. And
Totally.
I think that your goal is a really cool one, and I hope that it happens for you, brother. Thank you for the time.
If you're watching this and you're an investor, send me checks.
Yeah.
There we
There
go.
you go. 1,000 print orders minimum and checks. For
Yeah,
us.
you got
Let's
it.
do it. Dude, for real, thank you so much for the time, brother.
Thank you for
Thanks for
having me.
coming
This
on,
is
man.
awesome.